interrupting programmes to tell you that Diana, Princess of Wales, is gravely ill in intensive care in Paris's Salpêtrière Hospital after being seriously injured in a car crash which killed her friend, Naharadeh Dodi Fayed.
And now there is confirmation that Diana, Princess of Wales, has died.
Dodi and Diana being murdered, definitely. I am the father who knows everything.
I don't think MI5 would murder Princess Diana, but I don't know.
I'm sitting here today at my desk in October, longing for someone to hug me and encourage me to keep strong and hold my head high. This particular phase in my life is the most dangerous. My husband is planning an accident in my car, brake failure and serious head injury in order to make the path clear for him to marry Tiggy. 10 months later, Diana was dead. More recently, it's these royals that have been in the spotlight, but it's actually Harry's mother that I'm really interested in talking about today. As someone who was born after Diana died, it's hard for me to understand the perception that the princess had in the public eye. Her groundbreaking human rights campaigns that would break barriers, the way she spoke about her feelings and the stress of being a member of the royal family, and the constant pressures from the media and paparazzi actually make her very similar to these current royals who are claiming they want so much peace and privacy while they've also signed a multi-million-pound Netflix deal. I digress. Her impact on society may be hard for me to understand. However, I, and the whole world included, knows that she died a tragic death surrounded by mystery and conspiracy. With the letter I quoted at the start from Diana to her butler being an intriguing piece of evidence, but what was it actually that made her so paranoid to write this? I think she actually had a number of reasons for her paranoia, from her infamous BBC Panorama interview in which she opened up about her depression and bulimia, which was unheard of for the royals. You were just expected to shut up and get on with it. And as a result of this interview, it's rumoured that she fell out with the Queen, prompting a divorce with Prince Charles. Then Prince Charles, now king, of course. Mohammed Al Fayed, an Egyptian billionaire who was the father to Dodi Al Fayed, one of the other passengers in the car and Diana's supposed love interest at the time, he claims that Diana was pregnant with Dodi's baby and the royal family couldn't bear to have an Egyptian Muslim as a stepbrother to the future king.
You believe there was a conspiracy to
Definitely,
kill Dodi?
they been murdered. Dodi and Diana being murdered, definitely. I am the father who knows everything.
Diana was also suspicious of the royal family after she had reason to believe that they bumped off one of her security guards a year after he was removed from his post for having an inappropriate relationship with the princess. The details of the security guard's death are strangely similar to that of Diana's. It's said that his motorbike could have been tampered with, and a strobe of flashing lights blinded him, causing him to crash and ultimately die. It could also be said that there was a motive from a military or arms dealing point of view. In January 1997, just a few months before Diana died, she would step into a landmine field in Angola, where she would learn about all the innocent people that were dying because of personnel landmines. This awareness would eventually lead to them being banned by the United Nations, but at the time they were a key weapon used by most UN countries all around the world. It's also been speculated that Diana was about to uncover a huge human trafficking operation run by world elites. Now, this one's of great interest to me as it lines up with the start of Jeffrey Epstein's antics. While the infamous Prince Andrew and Virginia Giuffre photo wasn't taken until the early 2000s, it's believed that Ghislaine Maxwell started recruiting young girls for Jeffrey Epstein around 1993, 1994, but they were supposedly really ramped up their pedo ring in around 1997, the same year Diana died. If you ask me, this is plenty of ammunition from plenty of different people to be used as a motive. Of course, none of this is proven fact, so let's move away from speculation for a moment and let's take a look at the official narrative of the night in question. Let's start in the evening at around 20 to 6 and 6:30. The couple, Diana and Dodi Al Fayed, were resting in their hotel room. Dodi went out to visit a jeweler where Mohammed Al Fayed, Dodi's father, says he was on his way to pick up an engagement ring. Mohammed Al Fayed claims that during some point of the evening, Dodi Al-Fayed would propose to Princess Diana, hence getting an engagement ring from the jewelers earlier that evening. Around 7 p.m, Diana and Al-Fayed left the Ritz for a rear entrance and were driven to Dodi's apartment, which was near the Arc de Triomphe. They planned to stay at the apartment for a while, then go out for dinner a bit later on. They had no plans to return back to the Ritz Hotel that same evening. Just before 9 o'clock, the couple wanted to go out for dinner that night, but because of the press and the photographers that were following them, they decided instead to go back to the Ritz Hotel and they would just have dinner there instead. The couple arrived at the Ritz Hotel restaurant at around 10 to 10. Dodi became suspicious that some photographers claiming to be guests at the hotel were sitting in the restaurant and trying to snap secret photos of them, so they took the dinner up to their room and ate there. It was around 10 past 10 that the hotel security manager, Henry Paul, which drove the car when they crashed that night, came back to the hotel after supposedly going to a bar after his shift and having a few drinks by himself. Between 20 past 10 and half 10, Henry Paul would go outside the front of the hotel and would taunt all the paparazzi and photographers, telling them on at least 3 occasions that Diana was about to come out the front door, giving them time frames of between 10 to 15 minutes. Between 10:30 and midnight, Diana and Dodi were relaxing in their hotel room, and then all of a sudden they would decide that they wanted to go back to Dodi's apartment. Hotel surveillance footage would capture the two smiling in an elevator as they headed down towards the back of the hotel to make a quick escape. On August 31st, 20 minutes past midnight, bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones in the front seat, Henry Paul behind the wheel, the couple would get into the back of a black Mercedes and would leave the hotel. 3 minutes later, the Mercedes would supposedly clip a white Fiat Uno at the entrance to the tunnel and then would crash into the 13th pillar. The impact, which some outside the tunnel said sounded like an explosion, would kill Henry Paul and Dodi Al-Fayed instantly. Security guard Rees-Jones and Diana were seriously injured.
We're interrupting programmes to tell you that Diana, Princess of Wales, is gravely ill in intensive care in Paris's Salpêtrière Hospital after being seriously injured in a car crash which killed her friend, Daharader Dodi Fayed.
It took around 7 minutes at half past midnight for the police to arrive, and the ambulance arrived 10 minutes later. At 1 a.m, Diana was removed from the car and they performed CPR to get her back to a stable level, and then she was put inside the ambulance at 18 minutes past 1. They supposedly did some more work inside the ambulance and they didn't leave the scene until almost 20 to 2. 23 minutes after they put Diana in the ambulance. 6 minutes past 2, Diana would arrive at the hospital, and 2 hours later at 4 a.m, she was pronounced dead. This wasn't announced to the public until 6 a.m. that morning. After the crash, the police got to work as you would expect, and 2 hours after the crash, they actually arrested 7 members of paparazzi for manslaughter. They said a high-speed chase in which all the cars were involved in caused the crash. It was 4 hours after the crash that the scene was scrubbed, cleaned, and opened. 36 hours later, the police changed their narrative. They now said the driver was at fault. They said Henry Paul was drunk and on medication. This remains the official narrative. It was also said that he was travelling 120 miles per hour. Some other important things to note is that the traffic police's investigation was left out of the official report. There was no inquest or public inquiry in the UK, as there should have been by law, until 2004. And this wasn't released until 2006. Obviously, even looking at all the facts, there are some things that stand out here. Why did it take so long to get Diana into the ambulance and then so long to get to the hospital where she would be able to receive the best treatment? Why was the traffic police's report left out of the investigation? And why did it take the British authorities so long to start their inquiry? These are just the questions we have from looking at the surface level facts. So let's dig a little bit deeper. Let's talk about autopsies, starting with Diana. Now, the main thing to note about Di's autopsy is, well, the lack of one. Diana was illegally embalmed by Jean Moncur just 10 hours after her death. Dodi's father, Mohammed Al-Fayed, has claimed that the procedure was ordered by MI6 to obliterate chemical traces of pregnancy. However, Moncur said that it was just to make her presentable for Prince Charles and Diana's sister, who were on their way to Paris to take her body home. He also said that time was of the essence, as he feared that the summer heat would speed up the decomposing process. Don't they normally put bodies on ice for that exact reason? But I'm not the expert, so I guess I shouldn't comment. But seriously, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. You have a prince coming to see the body of his ex-wife. I can understand that he might have been under a little bit of pressure. But now let's look at the driver's autopsy, Henri Paul. The man who was supposedly driving 120 miles per hour and was 3 times over the French drink driving limit. So just coming away from the autopsy for a moment, this is a video of Henri Paul 30 minutes before the crash. This footage shows him squat down, tie up his shoelaces pretty eloquently, no stumble or slip. That doesn't look like a man under the influence from me. However, it doesn't actually prove much. Back to the real science, not just my bro science. The first pointer I want to look at, as well as being over the drink driving limit, the autopsy also showed that Henri Paul had 20% carbon monoxide levels in his blood. Now, what on earth does that mean? The carbon monoxide levels were explained by Paul's heavy cigarette smoking. However, during a 2008 inquest, a toxicology professor, Robert Forrest, admitted that he could not find any logical explanation for 20% carbon monoxide levels in blood. If Paul's carbon monoxide levels were truly this high, then this would have caused him to be erratic. Forget driving a car, he wouldn't have even been able to walk. Even if he could have stumbled into the car, the bodyguard would have stopped him from driving it. It is his job to keep Diana safe, and being chauffeured by an intoxicated driver isn't one of the best methods of protection. Because of these findings, it suggests Henri Paul's autopsy was botched. Paul's family asked for an independent post-mortem. This was, as you could guess, denied. They also asked for the independent analysis of blood work, as they seriously doubted Henri would have driven a car. But once again, as I'm sure you guessed,
strongest Avenger.
Access denied.
The family did get to see the autopsy report, and with the backing of Mohammed Al Fayed, they had 4 of Europe's top pathologists confirm 28 critical errors were made, making the autopsy unreliable, including not timing the autopsy, no IDing of the body, and absolutely no explanation for the 20% carbon monoxide levels. Pathologists state that a mix-up in samples should seriously be considered. Paul's family, along with Al Fayed, are still fighting for Henri Paul's blood samples. But another theory I want to suggest was maybe Paul's carbon monoxide levels were as high as 20%, and somehow he was poisoned while in the car, causing him to become erratic, driving at extremely high speeds and resulting in a crash. Henri Paul's autopsy wasn't the only thing about him that's a bit of a mystery. Henri Paul's Ritz salary was around $30,000 a year, but his bank balance spread across 15 different accounts was around $200,000. He also had $1,500 of cash on him at the time of the crash. This money has never been explained by anyone. Interestingly, before his life as a Ritz security guard, Paul was an Air Force captain, and then he later opened his own unsuccessful private detective agency. Upon joining the Ritz's security team in the 80s, he gained the nickname the Ferret, as he liked to stick his nose everywhere. It's also been suggested that Paul was an informant for many different Secret Service agencies, hence this exuberant amount of cash, including MI6. No one's suggesting that Paul was some sort of 007, just that he was a useful informant. Richard Tomlinson was a former MI6 agent who claimed that in the 90s he used an informant who was a security guard at the Ritz. Unfortunately, he couldn't recall a name, but he suggested that it was common practice for the MI6 to hire people in everyday jobs, such as lawyers, photographers, and security guards, to get information from places that they couldn't always be. Tomlinson claims go a step further when he spoke out about a plan MI6 drafted up to kill a Serbian president, Slovanov Milošević. He stated that they planned to tamper with his car, intoxicate the driver, and use a series of flashing lights to blind the driver, resulting in a crash. This is strangely similar to the events of our subject matter, as many witnesses claimed that they saw bright flashing lights around the time of the crash. Tomlinson was arrested by French police and treated extremely badly by MI6, which I can understand as he released books revealing secrets of the Secret Service. There was also a former SAS sniper whose mother-in-law came out and claimed that he told stories about his regiment positioning and operating lights to blind the driver. However, this is of course very hearsay, so I almost didn't include it, but I guess it doesn't hurt to know. So what clues can we take from all the street cameras that would have showed Diana's route before the crash? Before we look at the street cameras, let's just take a look at the route from Google Maps. So welcome to Paris. Let's start here on the map with the Ritz Paris, where we've been talking about a lot already. You may notice the courtyard from a couple clips I had earlier of all the paparazzi outside here. And obviously we know that they made their escape out the back down this road here. So obviously they crashed at the Point d'Alema. So let's just put the Point d'Alema in the maps here. So this will just give us an idea of the route that the car drove that night towards the bridge, the Point d'Alema. Now, the tunnel doesn't actually go under the River Seine. The tunnel, you can see the entrance to the tunnel here. So it's just under this junction. And they entered from this side. So they traveled south along the River Seine, not going over the bridge as this route says, just continuing down here. And obviously, of course, they met their fate in the tunnel. Now, Dodi's apartment was by the Arc de Triomphe, right? Which is over here. So my first question, just from looking at the map, why did they travel along the Seine, traveling west, when all they needed to do was go north and then northwest to get to Dodi's apartment by the Arc de Triomphe? There was no need for them to go the route that they went. There's many different reasons. Perhaps they were trying to evade the paparazzi, or perhaps the driver knew that this location was the marked hit location. I don't know. I don't want to be too conspiratorial here. I try and just give facts and lay out some different theories and let you make your own minds up. But however you want to look at this, it's rather strange. Let's go back to the Point d'Alema for a second, and let's have a look at the hospital that Diana went to. Now, if I just put it in here, it should give us the route. So here we can see from the Point d'Alema, the hospital's around 30 minutes away. This is the hospital that the ambulance drove Diana to. Now, interestingly, there's another hospital in Paris that's a lot closer, by the Notre Dame here. 17 minutes away, not 30 minutes away from the Point d'Alema. Why did they go to the hospital that was further? Why not this one? Now it's explained by saying there was a doctor supposedly at this hospital that would have been able to treat Diana's injuries more precisely. Maybe that's the case, but whatever way you look at it, these two little features I've pointed out just from looking at the map, they're strange. They can be seen as strange, however you want to look at it. So you make your own minds up. Okay, so back to the cameras. What do they tell us? Well, how about you take a guess?
It's right. Very well done, Charlotte. I have a feeling it's going to go a long way down. And it does!
They tell us nothing. Absolutely nothing. More beneficial conveniences. When Mohammed Al Fayed's lawyers requested copies and tapes from 17 cameras that covered the journey of Diana's Mercedes from the Ritz Hotel to the Point d'Alema, they were told by the French police that no such tapes existed for those cameras. Not to mention the 14 cameras inside the tunnel that were all either broken or facing the wall. In fact, French authorities claimed that the cameras were not recording any images at the time of the crash, and it was noted by NBC that Paris had the most sophisticated video surveillance system of any city in the world, with all the cameras saving videotapes for up to 2 days, except of course on this occasion. It's been speculated in some different reports that there was a white Fiat Uno that could have caused the crash, with debris from such a car found at the scene and markings on the Mercedes. Perhaps it was the person that took this photo just moments before the crash. It's predicted that the Merc would have hit the rear of the Fiat, sending it out of control. Police went forward and did an exhaustive database search of 112,000 different Fiats, but they never found this elusive car. No driver ever came forward either. However, Mohammed Al Fayed's private detectives found this white Fiat Uno with a recently replaced rear tail light that the Mercedes would have hit. Now, the owner of this car also happens to be a paparazzi, a man by the name of James and Danson. Now, James and Danson's history was strange. There's photos of him with different French prime ministers. He was the personal photographer for another. And that summer, he was following Diana and Dodi, snapping photos of them. It's also said that he was on a yacht with them for 3 days. That's super strange for a pap to be hanging around with celebs on private yachts. He was also the last person to photograph ex-French President Pierre Bergov, who committed suicide. So this wouldn't be the first time that his shutter doomed someone right before their death. The weirdness around Danson doesn't stop there. He also committed suicide by setting his car on fire on army training grounds. Now, the French investigator that investigated this saw the vehicle ablaze and saw his corpse still alight when he got to the scene. He also had a 2-inch hole in his temple. The police said that this 2-inch hole was caused simply from the intensity of the heat of the blaze. However you want to look at it, it's super strange. There's so many scenarios surrounding this Anderson guy that are super weird, and friends have come out and said they're really skeptical of suicide. As for the car itself, Mercedes were paid to carry out a crash test, but they were never actually allowed to see the wreckage of the car. The 120 miles per hour narrative also came out to be false, as they claimed they got this speed as the speedometer was stuck at 120 miles an hour when they found the wreck. However, Mercedes came out and confirmed that this would have been impossible, as the speedometer clocks down to 0 after an impact. Now you can find a numerous number of sources that claim maybe they were going 18 miles an hour, maybe they were going 60, maybe 50. Realistically, I don't think anyone actually can say for sure, so God knows why they decided to pick 120 miles an hour. The Mercedes used in the crash had been stolen 3 months earlier, and all the electronics had been ripped out, making it super unsafe to drive. Could someone else have tampered with the car when it was stolen? And why was the Ritz Hotel using a chauffeured car that had just been stolen and had missing electronics? It just doesn't seem very upper class to me. When Dodi's body was pulled from the wreck, the only thing found on his persons was 1,000 francs. Where was his lighter and cigarettes? He was a smoker. More importantly, where was his mobile phone that he had used that night to call his father, Mohammed Al-Fayed, on many different occasions? It's also been suggested that there was cocaine found in the car, but because of pressures from higher-ups, it simply wasn't declared. The more you look into this case, just the more questions you have. For example, the security guard Trevor Rees-Jones, what did he have to say about the crash as the only survivor? Well, he said in an inquest to Diana's death, the last thing that he remembers of the night was getting into the car at the Ritz, meaning he was missing around 4 minutes of his memory before the crash. Now, of course, this is entirely possible, but it's just so convenient. Also, you have this photographer, Lionel Charrault, who 4 nights after the crash, someone broke into his apartment, leaving all sorts of valuables, jewelry, money, and took his hard drives, laptops, and computers where he used to store images that he had that he would send to international media of the crash and of the couple. What else maybe was on those photos that would reveal things? Or even if there wasn't anything on the photos, why was someone worried enough to steal these photos? Perhaps there was details missing that the photographer hadn't spotted yet, that people were worried about maybe one day he would spot. Mohammed Al-Fayed has also made a movie called Unlawful Killing, but unfortunately it's never seen the light of day due to possible legal actions. I bet this movie has some great insight, and I really hope maybe one day we get to see it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, check out some of my others and be sure to subscribe for more.